I had some time to kill at the spaceport. We'd already made our delivery, and a different client was due to bring the next package to us later today, for transport to some other population center. Captain Sunlight was currently in discussions with a third individual, who sounded like they were fine with whatever delivery time we could manage. That was a nice change. Also nice was the fact that I didn't have to worry about any of the details. The captain was on top of things, with a couple other crewmates at hand, or in Mur's case at Tentacle. I was free to wander a bit. So I did, strolling through the civilized area with all its concrete and murals, and out toward the edge of the area where plants grew. It looked peaceful out there. Plus, I heard excited shouts and laughter on the breeze, and I was very curious. This seemed to be the forgotten area of town. There was a big pile of machine parts near what passed for a doorway, and I had to climb around some of it. I thought briefly about seeing whether it was legitimately up for grabs, might be worth selling as salvage off-world. But that didn't seem worth the trouble. It probably belonged to somebody. Plus, most of the pieces were huge, cogs and gear shafts that weighed more than me, unwieldy cables and things I couldn't identify. One part looked like a broken teeter-totter. I stepped over a warped panel, trying not to lose my balance as a stack of gears shifted when I leaned on it. Then I immediately forgot all of that. I could see the hills outside town. There was a mock battle going on. The mossy green hills were covered in dozens of heat-seekers with a variety of scale colors, split into two factions wearing either brown or silver belt sashes. They used hand weapons that were clearly toys, blaster-shaped things that launched foam balls soaked in some sort of temporary paint. Or maybe it was a perfume. Either way, they were aiming at each other with the kind of childlike abandon I hadn't seen since my last water balloon fight back on Earth. I moved past the junk heap and took a spot on the hill, sitting down on the springy moss to watch. The heat-seekers I knew were either too sensible or too shy for this kind of shenanigans. I tried to decide whether it was racist of me to assume the little lizardy folk weren't into recreational combat as a species-wide generalization, or if my sample size was just too small. Then a recently killed combatant saw me watching and came over to rest on the moss while her perfume faded. It was salmon-colored and smelled like recently cut ivy vines. "Hello," she said with a smile, sounding out of breath. "My side is losing." I had to smile back. "I'm sorry to hear that." "It's okay," she told me. "We'll switch the teams up soon. Anyone stationed on the high ground has an advantage." She waved a scaly green hand toward a big hill that did seem central to the battle. The brown sash team had a stockpile of the foam stink balls up there, and they were reloading while their enemies charged uphill. I said, "Looks like fun either way." "Oh, it is." "I have to say I haven't seen this kind of thing often," I told her. "Everyone's always so serious about not wanting to get hurt." She waved her hand and her tail in the same dismissive motion. "Off-worlders are boring." "Apparently so." I watched a pair of sneaky individuals come up the other side of the hill and make a dash for the weapons stockpile. They got foam balls tossed at them by hand and had to retreat in pinkish-orange defeat. I asked, "Oh, is throwing allowed too?" "Sure, though the launchers are more effective. Nobody's going to throw far enough to tag someone from a distance." "Well," I said, remembering our differences in shoulder anatomy, "I could, but that would be cheating." "You could?" she asked. "How far?" "Pretty far," I said. I rotated my arm in a circle to demonstrate. "My species is all about throwing. We've been chucking rocks at dangerous things since the beginning." She raised her own arm, which didn't make the same smooth motion. The bones were different. "Wow, that must be useful. And it would definitely fall under the historical cutoff." "Is this a historical thing?" I glanced at the ball launchers, which looked modern enough to me. "Yes, nothing from the last 3 centuries, she said. "Inspired by at any rate. These are all recreations, of course." "Of course." I wondered if this planet had been using a different kind of ball for actual battles 3 centuries ago. Maybe poison berries or something like that. Then she interrupted my thoughts with, "It's a pity we can't all use your arm." "What about other launching tools?" I asked, looking around. "If we had the right kind of sticks, you might be able to use one to throw those decently far. Or even a slingshot. Though that probably wouldn't get any farther than the things you have. Or what about—" I turned to look at the pile of junk. "I wonder." "Yes?" she asked, visibly curious. The perfume paint was already fading. "Does all this stuff belong to anybody? Would they mind if we moved it around?" She assured me that it did not, and any exciting off-worlder cleverness would be most welcome. "Great to hear," I said, getting up, "because there's a distinct possibility that we can use it to make a trebuchet." She was immediately on board with no idea what that word meant. She called over a couple friends who were similarly dead for the moment while I hauled a big broken thing free from the pile. It was the one that reminded me of a seesaw with one side snapped off. Pretty ideal for a trebuchet, especially if we could fasten a heavy gear to the short side. And there were even a couple of those about the right weight, just light enough for the group of us to shove around without anyone losing a toe. Plus plenty of cables. The other team surely wondered what we were doing dragging the unwieldy monstrosity out onto the moss. I told everyone that I couldn't promise it would work very well. It doesn't have the full range of motion that it should, so the aim is probably way off, but it's worth a try. An exceptionally slender male said, "Even if it falls apart immediately, this is already fun. Who has the ammo?" There were more silver-belted heat-seekers gathering around, some carrying small buckets of the stink balls. The brown team retreated to their hilltop to regroup. Pretty perfect, really. I aimed the junkyard siege engine as best I could, then supervised the loading of one whole bucket onto the long side. Everybody grabbed the cables we'd tied to it and pulled until the weight on the short end lifted high into the air. "And drop," I yelled, letting go. The others did too, jumping back as the long end of the trebuchet whipped skyward. The foam balls soared in a glorious arc toward the startled enemy forces, who dodged with only partial success. Then they laughed and demanded a turn. "Team switch," yelled the green one I'd first spoken to. She said, "I think this calls for a new game." "What about just seeing who's best at dodging?" I suggested. "You don't even need teams for that." "Very true," she agreed, fingering her sash. The other team was hurrying over while everyone chattered excitedly. "This is a genius bit of weaponry," she told me. "Are you sure it's more than 3 centuries old?" I laughed. "This is thousands of years old. It's far older than anything explosive, much less lasers and stun guns." "What?" she exclaimed. "Your people thought of this first." "Humans are all about throwing," I said with a grin. "Remind me to tell you about slingshots and lacrosse poles. Oh, and bolas. And spear launchers. And boomerangs." "Please do. Next week is the big meetup and they won't know what hit them."